I was with a church the other day in a place called Stenning, and they claim to have got the oldest church door in the whole county of West Sussex.
I love
it's
that.
like 800 years old, and it's like that door has been standing there for the last 800 years. So I can't really conceptualize that in my mind. I'm not.
Well, hello and welcome to the Church Office Podcast. My name is Gavin Smith, and it's a joy today to welcome you to our Admin and Ops podcast. We love talking about the work of ministry behind the scenes, and we get leaders, we get pastors, vicars, we get admin and ops staff listening to the podcast. And so thank you so much for tuning in. And our special guest today is Andrew Clark. Andrew, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Gavin, it's great to be with you today. Thank you for having me.
It's really exciting, and we're talking about kind of fundraising, and Andrew's just doing a stunning job in that whole area, and wanted to really introduce him to all of you and to hear about his work. So before we get into our topic, let me just say a huge thank you to our sponsors of the podcast, Church Suite, and thank you to Gavin and the team at Church Suite who work so hard in delivering what is a brilliant product, to help integrate new people, to run your events, your youth ministry, your check-in, the small groups, managing volunteers. I mean, you can receive donations through it. There is so much. If you're looking for a piece of software to manage your church well, to think about how you can save time and get others involved, then this is a brilliant piece of software. We use it at our church. It's used with churches, thousands of churches up and down the country. And if it's the first time you're hearing about Church Suite, then go and check them out at churchsuite.com. Andrew, it's great to have you on. And Catherine was doing some research on you, and you are involved in so many different aspects of work. I don't know where to start, but tell us a little bit about yourself and your family and the local church that you go to. Tell us about that.
Great. Yeah, be delighted to. And hello to everyone listening. So I'm Andrew Clark, born and raised in West Sussex on the south coast. And I've been going to church, unfortunately, well over 40 years now. I kind of grew up in a church-going family, but kind of made my own kind of personal commitment around the age of 10. So I've been a Christian for well over 30 years now, and did a bit of traveling as a young man, did a university degree in Wales, but then kind of settled back in West Sussex and rooted now in a church in Chichester with my wife and two amazing children.
I love that. I love that. What degree did you do in Wales? I'm interested because we're based in Wales.
Yeah, I did my degree in Newport in South Wales.
No way. That's where the church that we're in, Christchurch in Newport. So, mate, that's amazing. Were you at Killeen campus or were you somewhere else?
Yeah, I lived in St Julian's, but the first year lived in Killeen, and then 3 years I studied in Killeen throughout, but yeah, kind of lived in St Julian's area for about 3 years. So I know Newport well, I think.
Oh, mate. Well, I didn't even realize we had such a link that you came here for uni. That's amazing. Yeah, Newport's not one of those, great towns or cities that you hear people talk about, but we love it and love serving the church here. So, mate, one of the things that I first came across you with was the church grant stuff that you're doing. And and that's a big piece of work, as we talk about kind of operations and operations managers who are managing buildings, facilities, and updating them, and all the different work that we do behind the scenes, finding funding for ministry. Church grants is a really helpful place to go, isn't it? Can you fill us in a little bit about your kind of involvement and what that's about?
Absolutely. So I kind of fell into fundraising purely by accident, roughly about 2 decades ago. I did some work with local authority and universities and the NHS, but always had kind of my own heart to do my own thing. And so I launched my own company now kind of over 8 years ago. And then I met a chap called Matthew based in Birmingham. And Matthew goes through a kind of a higher Anglo-Catholic tradition of a church. And I'm kind of from a free evangelical kind of background. So we kind of span both spectrums of the church family. And we were both fundraisers, and we found we had like a wealth of just experience and knowledge about the funding sector and and the church sector specifically, because we've both been dabbling in this area for a little while. And we thought this must be of value and of resource to the wider church
Yeah.
family. So Matthew launched Church Grants many, many years ago now, just based on his lists of funders. And I brought in a bit more of a business development side and how to develop the products that we were offering. But essentially, it's a database of funding and funders who specifically say they support churches or Christian charities. Do you know, Gavin, how many trusts and foundations there are in the UK which give out money each year?
I wouldn't even be able to guess. It must be in the thousands, is it?
It's about 8,000 trusts and foundations,
Wow.
but some are going to be really small, small and bespoke. You know, the restoration of old boats
Yeah.
or the protection of farming land, etc., etc.
Okay.
So a lot of them are going to be wildly irrelevant to the work of a church. So we've done loads of research. And we think we found the best and most aligned funders for churches and Christian
Yeah.
charities. And we
Yeah.
list nearly kind of 500 funders which support England, Welsh, Scottish, and Northern Irish churches and charities.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I just looking at the website, we've registered, and I think there's a small cost, isn't there, of around sort of £50 for an annual membership, and that gives you the ability to access these funds that you've mentioned, and then you can sort of take the initiative to go on and apply for money through that kind of through the contacts that you're providing. I mean, it's a staggering amount. I don't know how you track this, but as people have gone through your site, found funders, being able to access money, there's something like almost £400 million has been raised,
Yeah,
through the connection with you and, your research and the work that you've done in pulling it together in one place. Mate, that is absolutely
yeah.
staggering. You must be thrilled when you look at that and see that.
Uh, Yeah, I think when we have people who are custodians or rent premises, often they don't come from a background of how to fundraise or generate income, and
Yeah,
sometimes large projects are just landed at one person's feet or a small team, and it can be quite bewildering where to even start to
yeah,
find external funding. So what we've done is we've read through the annual accounts of each of the funders we've found,
yeah,
and usually within those accounts, it will list how much grants they gave away the kind of
yeah,
following year. So that kind
yeah,
of mega number, nearly 400 million, is all the cumulative totals of all the
yeah,
grants given away by those grant funders. So we've
yeah.
identified nearly 500 funders who collectively have given away, yeah, nearly 400 million pounds last year.
Which is remarkable, isn't it? It is remarkable, and what a blessing if you're a church who's, looking for funding for staff, looking for funding for buildings. I know you've got loads on there for building projects and for help
Yeah.
in that kind of maintenance and side of things.
Mm.
I was just talking to one church in Liverpool who were doing some stained glass work, and the bill was going to be, over £200,000
Mm.
to do the work. It's
Mm.
incredible. But through the site, through access to the contacts that you've got, they've been able to raise something like 125,000
Oh,
within a
great. Mm.
relatively short amount of time.
Mm. Mm.
Which is amazing. So the starting point is, if you don't have a starting point, then this is a great place to go, and at a small
Mm.
cost, for a kind of an annual membership, mate. You're blessing the church here with this service.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, there is a kind of a small fee per annum, but we do have a research team behind us who are checking every entry at least kind of twice a year. So there is a workforce behind keeping the data up
Yeah,
to date. And of course, we want to and need to kind of pay those people. So there is a charge to maintain the site and keep it up to date and relevant. We also run a lot of training as well, kind of
yeah,
online webinars. Because some people, I mean, you mentioned the example in Liverpool. I would say 200K is quite a light and modest project. I'm
yeah,
working with
yeah,
projects all the time,
yeah,
which are running into the multi-million pounds,
yeah,
and that could feel very quickly quite overwhelming and daunting. So
yeah,
knowing, what are the first things to do in planning a large capital appeal
yeah.
well, or how do we find funding for our children and families worker. Our hope is that we can give a bit of guidance and a bit of a start of a 10 of how do you approach the whole fundraising sphere and do it well and successfully.
Yeah, that's great. And so the other hat that you wear that sort of is more direct working with churches in a kind of consultancy basis. It is the stuff that you do through action planning. Tell us a little bit about that if someone on the podcast haven't heard about them and what they do.
Yeah. So action planning is one consultancy I work for. There's another one called Wood and George Limited. So these are both national consultancies who work with all sorts of churches and charities across the country, and they've got a bank of associates of which I'm one of. We cover pretty much everything, I think, from marketing and communications and strategy, but a lot of fundraising and income generation support. So often I'm the kind of go-to person regarding church capital appeals or any kind of fundraising work with churches. So those are two great consultancies which I've been working for many, many years, as well as we take direct commissions through the Church Grants site as well. So if any church wants to chat about their project, then drop us a line and we'll be happy to chat with them pro bono, no problem at all.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Yeah, great. So reach out to Andrew, and I'll put his kind of contact details in the show notes when we publish this. And we've invited you along to something that I'm involved in called UCAN and UK Church Administrators Network, and we've got a conference happening in the summer, and you're going to come and deliver a seminar basically for those people particularly. If you're thinking about someone listening today, they can go to the Church Grants site, start to kind of get an idea of what funds are out there, what funding could be available. What advice do you have for churches who, I'm coming across lots of churches who are running a deficit, who are looking at kind of how do we fund staff or programs? There's a growing need for that. And with costs of utilities and building related stuff and maintenance growing, there are pressure points happening for churches, and I guess for an ops manager or a church manager, it kind of falls on their lap to go, right, what can we do? What would be some of your advice that you could offer?
Yeah, I think the first bit of advice is, yes, you can get money externally for bits and pieces and specific projects. If you've got a renovation project for your kitchen, for example, that could be potentially fundable from external sources. If you could demonstrate a good community angle and impact, who uses the site beyond sacred and church ministries, other groups locally who could use for the kind of site or premises. What's the compelling reason? There's a great guy called Simon Sinek who talks about the power of the why, and starting with the why question, because I think as churches we quickly jump to, oh, what do we need? Oh, we need a new kitchen, or we need to have staff. But kind of just unraveling that a little bit and starting with, why do you need that kitchen? Why do you need that staff member? That instantly is a compelling narrative and story to present externally. I'm also surprised, working with a large spectrum of churches, how little money and giving is spoken about in some denominations and some churches. I think, after the kingdom of heaven, money was the second most popular thing that Jesus spoke about, money and possessions. So I think I would encourage churches to create a culture of giving, obviously giving within our means and how God is leading us to kind of give on a personal, on a family basis. But in terms of that ongoing core revenue demand, that probably surely has to be met by those who are gathering each week and month, and encouraging a culture-based giving to meet those ongoing costs, but also identifying the options and the art of the possible to get external funding for bits and pieces and specific other social projects or capital needs. I often think churches don't even consider grants, but they are a good option.
Yeah, I think that's great, isn't it? I think it's really good advice, isn't it? Because we do have a culture where we don't tend to talk about giving as much, or we're almost embarrassed to talk about it a little bit. And often because part of it, as you engage with leaders, they're the ones who are being paid by the church. And there's this awkwardness, isn't there, to talk about it and to raise money, and those feelings, those things that come through across our heads and minds as we talk, or don't talk about it. It's really interesting. We did a podcast with Stewardship not so long ago, and just talking about the work that they're doing, and this kind of generosity report that they do, and the gap that there is in giving from, what might potentially be, say 10% of earnings to what the church is receiving. There's something like a 3 or 4 billion pound gap. Um,
Mm. Mm.
and so you're not just suggesting you going outward to get funds. You're talking about how do you change the culture internally as well as do the work outside. And I think that's really, really helpful.
Mm.
Yeah, good stuff, mate. Yeah, this
Yeah.
is really good. In terms of if someone was to hire you on a kind of consultancy basis, um, is there funding for churches to buy some of your time, or to be able to bring on a funding consultant? Is that even a thing? It's like funding for a funding, Any
Yeah, yeah,
thoughts on
it's a
that?
bit of a yes, there are some thoughts. I mean, my advice for the general church, if we're working with a capital project, anything above £250,000, I
Mm,
would definitely be advocating completing what we call a fundraising feasibility study, because
yeah,
the temptation is just to start fundraising. And often churches raise a bit, but we don't reach their target, or they're really passionate, but we don't have any strategy and they've not
yeah,
analysed different income markets. So
yeah,
definitely think over £250,000, just pausing and doing a fundraising feasibility study. And we do them, and there's a bit of a cost to that. I've known local funders, particularly, and even kind of councils, they like to fund strategic work up front to
yeah,
really give the fundraising
yeah,
project a firm base.
yeah,
But other than that, yeah, we're one of the costs, unfortunately, which churches just have to kind of find, a bit like their kind of preliminary reports or quantity surveying reports or working with an architect. We can lump our fees within, the big long line of professional fees and try
yeah,
and recruit
yeah,
some of it back from funders.
yeah,
That's definitely a possibility. Often people ask, "Oh, do we work on a commission basis, or kind of a percentage of the wins?" Is that isn't liked within the kind of sector. And
yeah.
I mean, imagine if you were a major donor, or whether you were a grant funder who gave,
Mm,
£10,000 grant or £50,000 grant, and then to find out a large chunk of that would be going straight to a consultant. I
yeah,
would feel pretty naffed off if I
yeah,
found that.
yeah,
So we're very upfront. We would have obviously a pro bono chat with a church or a charity, and say, "Oh, we think we could add value here,
yeah,
vis-a-vis agreed kind of outputs, and we would cost out on a day rate." And so everyone's going to clear and upfront what we're doing, what they're doing, and how much it's
yeah.
going to cost.
Yeah, great. Fill me in a little bit more about your training then as well, because that might be someone who's in a church listening to the podcast. Okay, yeah, I've got a bit of time. I'm going to go to your site. I'm going to sign up, and then I'm going to find where we can go and look for some funds.
Yeah.
Training wise for them, what sort of costs and what are some of the things that you might cover in that?
Yeah, firstly, we love training. We love meeting with a wide spectrum of churches. We love speaking with those with lots of experience or very little or no fundraising experience. We ran a training session last month, all to do with how do we plan for a church capital appeal. And
Yeah,
we talked through 5 key steps of planning and identifying resources and things you need to do and consider before venturing out on a capital project. This month, we are running one all to do with things beyond trust and grants. We're looking at major donor fundraising.
okay,
So, how can we identify people of interest or preferably affluence within our networks? How do we
yeah,
ask for money? Because it's not in our British DNA. We hate talking about money, and even asking for money is so much more squeamish. We absolutely hate it. So how can we do that better and take the scariness out? Lottery funding can be a dividing subject among churches. Some are pro, and some are against. So we're going to chat through the ethics, the moral dilemma of, do we approach the lottery for funding? And
mm,
there's some major funds there called Reaching Communities, and particularly the Heritage
yeah,
Fund for our older churches. And
yeah.
the third thing we're going to quickly run through is something called Community Infrastructure Levy funding. Have you ever heard of that,
No,
CIL?
no.
It's an amazing government fund. It used to be called Section 106, and some areas do still run a Section 106 and a CIL fund. So how can we get grants from our local authority? So we're running a session next month. We'll talk about it for about 45 minutes, an hour, and then just allow a loads of times for kind of Q&A. We
Yeah,
usually get about 100 churches come along.
great.
And again, just to kind of cover our time and prep, that's £9.99 for like an hour and a half's worth of training.
Yeah. That's really good value for money, isn't it?
Hopefully.
And yeah, for you, for your heart to serve churches in this way is wonderful. And I think that's why we particularly want to get you on a podcast. You know, you're doing a fantastic job here, and really, really making a difference. I'm just picturing, where 400 million pounds has been spent, in
Yeah,
terms of buildings and projects and staff, and
yeah,
what kind of kingdom impact that could have.
yeah.
um, which is wonderful. I think people do, like you say, do struggle with asking for money. We do struggle not having much experience in these things, and so having somebody that we can go to and ask for some help, get some training,
Mm.
mate, sounds fantastic. Um, Anything else that you've got coming up, or anything else that could be useful to kind of signpost people to?
I mean, just to flag up some really great funders, I'm doing loads of work with a grant giving body called the Benefact Trust.
Yeah.
They're one of the largest grant givers to Christian churches in the country, and we're increasingly doing some more work with them of how they can talk better to the churches and understand their needs a little bit more, and just understanding the application routes and how they can do that better. Because I think it can be overwhelming, getting this large, massive online form to get a grant. They obviously want to give money away and make it as easy as possible. So I'm doing lots of work with them and lots of kind of podcasting
Yeah.
and training as well. So do check out the Benefact Trust.
Yeah.
I'm going to this amazing conference with you guys in the summer.
Yeah.
I'm also writing, as a bit of a side project, a book about fascinating church doors from around the world.
Okay.
So, if
Okay.
any churches are listening and have got an interesting church door and a story behind that door for whatever reason, then I'd love to speak to you or have some sort of email exchange, because
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
writing this book, and it's going well. I'm identifying some interesting churches and doors, and writing about them in my spare time.
Okay. Now that is interesting. Tell me more about this then. How is church doors and stories? Give me one that you've had so far then.
Well, I think the church door is an often an underlooked and underappreciated bit of art. Usually, I
Yeah.
mean, these amazing doors, which are probably more aligned to our Catholic and Anglican friends who've got older churches and older doors. I was with a church the other day in a place called Stenning, and they claim to have got the oldest church door in the whole county of West Sussex.
I
I mean,
love
it's
that.
like 800 years old, and it's like that door has been standing there for the last 800 years. So I
Yeah.
can't really kind of conceptualize that in my mind. I'm knocking on it. I'm like, is it hollow? How thick is it? Just to kind of hold it and touch it, and just how many people have passed over that threshold and through that door, kind of worshiping God in this
Yeah.
church, and how many people have knocked on that door. I find that kind of really interesting. And there's a door in the West Country, of a church. They've embedded literally either side are two trees kind of embedded within the mesh of the church. And
Right.
apparently it's inspired Tolkien to write Lord of the
Right.
Rings, the kind of
Yeah.
Hobbit
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
kind of buildings. So I'm interested in those kind of quirky, interesting stories behind the church doors, which I love to look at, and I think they're works of art.
Okay. Well, let's get behind this, guys. If you've got a church door with some history,
Please get
uh,
in touch.
yeah, please do get in touch. Andrew, what's the best contact details for you?
You could drop us an email at info@churchgrants.co.uk.
Great. That's the best place to go. If you've got any questions for us, or we can help link you to Andrew, it's questions@thechurchoffice.co.uk. We'd love to kind of link you up to that, mate. It's that sounds like a fascinating little project on the side. I love those kind of things. Those are the little yeah, I often have some reading projects and things like that I do in the summer, and just slightly outside the normal box.
Yeah.
And some friends of mine are kind of visiting and working through visiting sort of almost every cathedral that they can over
Wow.
the next 12 months, and I love seeing their plans of how they're doing that, which is great. And I was in Rochester a couple of weeks ago doing a church review, and
Mm.
they've got a fantastic cathedral there, and
Mhm. Mm.
I don't mind tasting a bit of cake as well in one of the coffee shops, that kind
Right.
of stuff. Um, Mate, it's been great to have you on. let's get in contact with Andrew, and the support that's available through the website. Let me encourage you to go and download and get involved in signing up for their database on grants. The Benefact Trust, we've had some money for our church through that, and they've just been brilliant. Brilliant to work with. And if you're undergoing particularly a church building or some sort of project, we had some funding for a new floor that they kindly funded. And again, there's so many great stories of churches that have had success with that. So so please go and check it out. And for those coming to the UCAN conference, let me encourage you to come along. There's still some spaces left. Andrew and some others are going to be there. We're going to be touching on topics of AI. We're going to be touching topics of kind of managing change, working with teams, managing meetings, all the kind of stuff that we're doing behind the scenes in those admin and ops roles. So that's on the 22nd of June. It's a residential conference, and we'll all be there with the UCAN team and Andrew and others to serve churches and serve people in those roles. So mate, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll please check out the website. Please check out our services at the church office. If there's a way that we can support you in your local church, then we'd love to know about it, and we'd love to be able to try and help you. We'll see you again next time on the podcast. Thank you, Andrew.
Bye for now.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.